The radio crackled with desperation. "Commander Brooks is captured. All extraction birds are down." But in the corner of the briefing room, the quiet transport pilot stood up and said, "I can get him out, sir. Meet Lieutenant Sarah, Ghost Bird Kane, 27 years old, blonde hair always pulled back in regulation style, blue eyes that had logged over 2,000 flight hours but never in combat. For 18 months at Naval Air Station Oceana, she had been the pilot everyone overlooked, while her male counterparts flew FA-18 Super Hornets and MH-60 Seahawks on high-stakes missions. Sarah flew C-2 Greyhounds on routine supply runs between carriers and bases. Just a transport pilot, they would say. Safe missions only. But what none of them knew was that Sarah Kane carried the legacy of one of the most legendary pilots in Navy history. Her father, Captain Thomas Phantom Kane, had been a naval aviator whose name was whispered with reverence in ready rooms across the fleet. Before his death in a classified mission over the South China Sea 8 years ago, he had secretly trained his daughter in combat flying techniques that weren't taught in any official curriculum. Every weekend of her childhood had been spent at private airfields where her father taught her advanced tactical flying, nap of the earth flying, defensive maneuvering, night operations in zero visibility, and most importantly, how to infiltrate hostile airspace undetected. "Baby bird," he would tell her as they practiced impossible maneuvers. "Sometimes the most dangerous missions require the quietest approach. Everyone expects fighters and attack helicopters. No one suspects the transport pilot." Sarah had applied for combat pilot training after graduating from the Naval Academy with highest honors. Her test scores were perfect, her flight evaluations exemplary, her tactical knowledge superior to most experienced pilots. But the review board had other ideas. "Kane shows exceptional potential," they wrote, "but would be better suited for support operations rather than frontline combat roles." Translation: she was a woman, and despite policy changes, the Old Boys Network still believed that certain missions were too dangerous for female pilots. So they gave her transport duties and told her to be grateful for the opportunity to serve. What they didn't know was that Sarah used every routine supply run to practice combat maneuvers. During seemingly straightforward flights, she would drop to wave-top level and practice evasive flying. On night missions, she would navigate without instruments, using only stars and terrain features her father had taught her to recognize. She transformed every milk run into advanced tactical training. Commander Marcus Brooks was everything Sarah was not, celebrated, respected, and given the missions that mattered. At 34, he led SEAL Team 7 with a reputation for impossible extractions and surgical strikes. Brooks had personally led over 200 successful operations, earning the Navy Cross and becoming the youngest SEAL commander in recent history. He was the poster boy for naval special warfare, the kind of warrior that appeared on recruitment materials and spoke at congressional hearings about military readiness. Brooks knew Sarah existed. She had flown him and his team to insertion points dozens of times, but to him, she was just another support asset. Competent, reliable, but not someone you'd trust with life or death decisions. That attitude was about to change in the most dramatic way possible. The mission had started as routine intelligence gathering. Brooks and a 6-man SEAL team were inserted into Syria to confirm the location of a high-value target, a terrorist leader responsible for multiple attacks on American interests. Sarah had flown them in on what was supposed to be a simple drop-off, with extraction scheduled for 72 hours later. But intelligence is never perfect, and routine missions have a way of becoming disasters. At 0347 hours, the base received a priority transmission that changed everything. "Overlord, this is Neptune 7, Brooks's voice crackled through static. "We are compromised. Repeat, we are compromised. Taking heavy fire. Need immediate extraction." The operations center erupted into controlled chaos. Duty officers grabbed phones, intelligence analysts pulled up satellite feeds, and pilots ran toward aircraft. But within minutes, it became clear that the situation was worse than anyone had imagined. "Neptune 7, this is Overlord. We show multiple hostile vehicles converging on your position. Move to extraction point Alpha. Negative, Overlord. Alpha is compromised. Moving to Bravo. For the next hour, the radio traffic told the story of a perfectly planned ambush. Every extraction point Brooks's team reached was already occupied by enemy forces. Someone had leaked their mission parameters, and the terrorists were one step ahead of every move. Then came the transmission that sent ice through everyone's veins. Overlord, this is Neptune 6. Commander Brooks is down. Repeat, Commander is down and captured. Rest of Team KIA. I'm the only one left, and I'm surrounded. Have you ever heard the sound of hope dying? The operations center fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of aircraft engines. The most elite SEAL commander in the Navy had been captured alive, along with all the classified information in his head. Admiral Richardson, the base commander, stared at the tactical display showing Brooks's last known position, 200 miles inside hostile territory, surrounded by enemy forces with no friendly assets within 150 miles. Options? He asked grimly. Sir, said the operations officer, we have 2 MH-60s available, but they don't have the range for a penetration that deep without refueling. We'd need to establish a forward operating base, get approval from higher headquarters, coordinate with Allied forces. How long? Minimum 18 hours, sir. Probably 24. Everyone in the room knew what that meant. Brooks wouldn't survive 18 hours of interrogation. Whatever classified information he carried would be extracted long before any rescue force could reach him. That's when Sarah stepped forward from her position near the back of the room. For 18 months, she had attended these briefings as a silent observer, just another support pilot getting mission updates. But this time was different. Sir, she said quietly, I can get him out. The room turned to look at her as if she had just suggested they paint the aircraft pink. Admiral Richardson's expression moved from shock to irritation. Lieutenant Kane, this isn't a supply run to Norfolk. This is a combat extraction deep in hostile territory. Yes, sir. I understand that. You fly transports, Lieutenant. This requires special operations capabilities that, sir, with respect, I can get him out. Sarah's voice was steady, professional, but carried an edge that made several officers pay attention. I know that area of operations. I've studied the terrain, the flight routes, the enemy capabilities. I can get in and out without being detected. Colonel Martinez, the senior Marine officer, shook his head. Lieutenant, we're talking about flying solo into the most dangerous airspace in the region. No support, no backup, no rescue if things go wrong. This isn't what transport pilots train for. Sarah looked around the room at faces that ranged from skeptical to patronizing. These men respected her competence in her assigned role, but none of them could imagine her in combat. That was about to change. Colonel, may I ask what my father's call sign was? Martinez checked a tablet, confusion crossing his face. Your father? Captain Thomas Kane. His call sign was Phantom. Why does that matter? Because, Sarah said, walking to the tactical display, Phantom Kane developed half the penetration techniques still used by naval special warfare, and everything he knew, he taught me. The room fell silent. Thomas Phantom Kane was a legend in naval aviation circles, famous for missions so classified that most of their details remained buried in Pentagon vaults. He had pioneered low-level penetration flying, developed innovative tactics for infiltrating hostile airspace, and completed extractions that other pilots considered impossible. Admiral Richardson stared at Sarah with new interest. You're Thomas Kane's daughter? Yes, sir. And I've been practicing his techniques on every flight I've made for the past 18 months. Every supply run, every routine transport mission. I've been training for exactly this type of operation. This is insane, muttered the operations officer. She's never flown combat missions. She's not qualified for— Sir, Sarah interrupted, pulling up a map on the tactical display. Brooks's last known position is here, in the Kalamoon Mountains. Standard approach routes are all monitored by enemy radar and surface-to-air missiles. But there's a corridor through the valley system that's too narrow for conventional aircraft. She traced a route with her finger, highlighting terrain features and elevation changes. My C-2 Greyhound has the maneuverability to navigate that corridor at low level. The enemy expects rescue attempts to come from high-altitude helicopters or fighter escorts. They're not watching for a single transport aircraft flying nap of the earth through terrain that's supposed to be impassable. Colonel Martinez studied the route. That flying would be extremely dangerous. One mistake, and you're into a mountainside. The weather in that area is unpredictable. And even if you reach his location, how do you extract him? A Greyhound can't land in rough terrain. Sarah smiled for the first time since the briefing began. Sir, who said anything about landing? For the next 20 minutes, Sarah outlined a rescue plan that was either brilliant or suicidal. She would fly the Greyhound through the mountain corridors at extremely low altitude, using terrain masking to avoid enemy radar. Instead of attempting a landing, she would use a technique her father had taught her: precision aerial retrieval using a modified Stabo extraction system. The beauty of this approach, she explained, is that it's completely unexpected. Enemy forces are positioned to counter helicopter assaults and fighter strikes. They're not prepared for a single transport aircraft making a covert extraction using unconventional methods. Admiral Richardson listened to the entire briefing, his expression unreadable. When Sarah finished, he looked around the room at his senior officers. Opinions? It's too risky, said the operations officer. We'd be sending an inexperienced pilot on a suicide mission. The plan has merit, admitted Colonel Martinez grudgingly. But Kane lacks combat experience. One mistake, and we lose both her and Brooks. Sir, Sarah said quietly, Commander Brooks trained for years to become elite. But he's captured now because someone expected conventional tactics. Sometimes the best rescue comes from the person nobody expects. The Admiral stared at the tactical display for a long moment. Brooks had been his protege, a warrior he had personally mentored and promoted. Abandoning him was unthinkable, but sending another pilot to certain death was equally impossible. Kane, he said finally, if I authorize this mission, you understand you'll be completely on your own? No backup, no support, no rescue if things go wrong? Yes, sir. And you understand that if you're captured, the information in your head could compromise ongoing operations? Yes, sir. I'll carry a standard E&E kit with contingencies. Everyone in the room knew what she meant. If captured, she would be expected to take her own life rather than be interrogated. Admiral Richardson made the decision that would either save a SEAL commander or cost the Navy 2 of its finest officers. Kane, you're authorized for immediate launch. God help us all. As Sarah walked toward the door, Colonel Martinez called after her. Lieutenant, what's your call sign going to be for this mission? Sarah paused, thinking of her father and all the lessons he had taught her about courage, skill, and the responsibility that came with both. Ghostbird, sir, just like my father taught me to be. 40 minutes later, Sarah was conducting pre-flight checks on a C-2 Greyhound that had been hastily modified for the rescue mission. External fuel tanks extended her range, while specialized extraction equipment replaced the standard cargo bay configuration. Most importantly, the aircraft had been fitted with advanced countermeasures and low observable modifications that would help her avoid enemy detection. As she ran through her checklist, Sarah felt the familiar calm that came before difficult flying. This was what her father had trained her for during all those weekends at private airfields. Every impossible maneuver, every night flight in zero visibility, every lesson about reading terrain and weather had been preparation for this moment. Ghostbird, this is Tower. You are cleared for immediate departure. Weather en route is marginal with possible thunderstorms. Enemy activity is high throughout your area of operations. Tower, Ghostbird. Understood. Departing for the most important taxi ride of my career. The C-2 Greyhound lifted off into a dark sky filled with challenges that would test every skill Sarah possessed. As the lights of the base disappeared behind her, she keyed the radio one final time. Overlord, Ghostbird is airborne. I'm coming for him. The flight to Brooks's location took her through some of the most dangerous airspace in the world. Sarah flew at altitudes that barely cleared mountain peaks, using valleys and ridgelines to mask her approach from enemy radar systems. The modified Greyhound responded to her commands like an extension of her own will, turning and climbing with precision that would have impressed her father. 2 hours into the flight, she encountered her first major obstacle, a line of thunderstorms that stretched across her planned route. Standard procedure would be to climb above the weather or find an alternate route, but both options would expose her to enemy radar and surface-to-air missiles. Instead, Sarah chose the option her father had taught her. She flew through the storm at 200 feet above ground level, using lightning flashes to navigate between mountain peaks, while rain and turbulence tried to tear her aircraft apart. For 30 minutes, she fought to keep the Greyhound level while nature itself seemed determined to destroy her mission. When she emerged from the storm, her navigation systems had been partially damaged by electrical interference, but she was exactly where she needed to be, 50 miles from Brooks's last known position, flying through a valley so narrow that enemy forces had never bothered to monitor it. Neptune 6, this is Ghostbird. If you can hear this, I'm coming to get your commander. Static. Then a weak voice. Ghostbird, Neptune 6. Are you insane? This area is crawling with hostiles. They're holding Commander Brooks in a fortified compound about 5 clicks from my position. Neptune 6, I need you to mark the compound with IR strobes. I'm going to extract him using methods the enemy won't expect. How? The compound is surrounded by open ground. Any helicopter approach would be suicide. Sarah smiled grimly as she set up for her final approach. Who said anything about helicopters? The compound appeared exactly as intelligence had indicated, a rectangular structure surrounded by high walls, with guard towers at each corner and vehicles parked outside. But Sarah wasn't looking at the ground defenses. She was studying the airspace above the compound, calculating wind patterns and approach angles for a maneuver that had never been attempted in combat. Instead of approaching horizontally like a conventional aircraft, Sarah brought the Greyhound in at a steep angle, diving from 5,000 feet directly toward the compound. To anyone watching from the ground, it would look like an aircraft in distress, possibly shot down and crashing. At 500 feet, she pulled out of the dive and leveled off directly over the compound, flying so low that her landing gear nearly clipped the guard towers. The sudden appearance of a large aircraft overhead created exactly the confusion she needed. As guards scrambled to respond to the unexpected aerial threat, Sarah deployed the Stabo extraction system from her cargo bay. The specialized cable dropped directly into the compound's courtyard, where intelligence indicated Brooks was being held. Neptune 6, tell me your commander is mobile. Ghostbird, I can see him. He's moving toward your cable. For the next 60 seconds, Sarah flew a precise orbit around the compound while maintaining the exact altitude and speed necessary for the extraction. Enemy forces were shooting at her now, small arms fire and heavier weapons trying to bring down the unexpected intruder. Then she felt the telltale jerk that indicated someone had connected to the extraction cable. I've got him! Brooks's voice came through the radio, weak but determined. Get us out of here! Sarah pulled the Greyhound into a climbing turn that pushed both aircraft and pilot to their limits. Enemy tracers followed them into the sky, but the unexpected nature of the extraction had given them the crucial seconds needed to escape the immediate threat. Commander Brooks, Sarah called over the intercom. Welcome aboard Ghostbird Airlines. Please keep your arms and legs inside the aircraft until we reach cruising altitude. Brooks's laughter crackled through the radio. Kane, is that really you? The transport pilot? Just a taxi driver, sir. But sometimes that's exactly what you need. The flight back to base took them through the same dangerous corridors, but this time, Sarah was flying with the satisfaction of mission accomplished. When Naval Air Station Oceana appeared on the horizon, she keyed the radio with the message everyone was waiting to hear. Overlord Ghostbird, returning with precious cargo. Mission accomplished. The landing was flawless, a gentle touchdown that brought Sarah's most important flight to a perfect conclusion. As she taxied toward the ramp, she could see crowds of personnel waiting to welcome them home. Commander Brooks was the first person to meet her as she climbed out of the cockpit. His face showed the effects of captivity, but his eyes held something Sarah had never seen before: complete respect. "Kane," he said simply, "that was the most brilliant flying I've ever witnessed. You saved my life with skills I didn't know you possessed." Admiral Richardson approached, his expression showing a mixture of relief and amazement. "Lieutenant Kane, what you accomplished today was extraordinary. You conducted a solo rescue mission that special operations units would consider extremely challenging." "Sir," Sarah replied, "I just did what my father taught me. Sometimes the most important missions require the pilot nobody expects." 6 months later, Lieutenant Sarah Kane graduated from the Navy's elite test pilot school with the highest scores ever recorded by a female aviator. Her rescue of Commander Brooks became a case study taught to special operations pilots worldwide, proving that tactical brilliance and flying skill mattered more than gender or conventional expectations. But the moment that defined everything came 3 weeks after the rescue, when Admiral Richardson called Sarah into his office for a private meeting. "Kane, I'm recommending you for immediate assignment to the Navy's most classified aviation program. Your actions demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative thinking and tactical flying that we need for our most sensitive operations." Sarah looked at the assignment orders, seeing destinations and mission types that she had only dreamed about. "Sir, I thought I was just a transport pilot." Admiral Richardson smiled. "Lieutenant, after what you accomplished, no one will ever call you just anything again. You're a warrior pilot, and it's time the Navy treated you like one." Today, Commander Sarah "Ghostbird" Kane leads the Navy's Advanced Tactical Flying Program, training the next generation of pilots in unconventional operations and rescue techniques. On her office wall hangs a photo from that night in Syria, showing a C-2 Greyhound flying impossibly low through mountain valleys with a simple caption, "Sometimes the best rescue comes from the sky." Have you ever been underestimated because of your job title, only to prove that your true capabilities were far beyond what anyone imagined? Sarah's story reminds us that the most dangerous assumptions are often the ones we make about the quiet professional who's been preparing for their moment all along. Sarah Kane didn't just rescue a SEAL commander that night, she rescued her own career from the limitations others had placed on it. Sometimes our greatest victories come disguised as routine missions, and our most important moments arrive when we're least expected to succeed. If you believe that true capability reveals itself when everything is on the line, share this story. Because somewhere, someone is still being judged by their current assignment rather than their potential for greatness.